Now that it's quiet, good evening and welcome to the Westchester County Executive Forum on Sustainability. My name is Nanette Bourne and I'm the Westchester Chapter Chair of the New York League of Conservation Voters. NYLCV is a sister organization of the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. The Education Fund is a co-host of this evening's event along with Pace Law School and Pace Law School Environmental Law Program. As we all know, Westchester County is facing a number of environmental issues, including transportation, air quality, water resources, and open space funding. And pretty soon we're going to be marking the one-year anniversary of Superstorm Sandy that has made us all more aware, as if we needed to become more aware, of the issues concerning climate change. On the back of the program that I think you all received when you came in, you can find a brief sustainability agenda that outlines some of the areas that the Education Fund believes are important for the candidates to consider. This agenda will help inform our discussion tonight. The goal of tonight's forum is to allow the candidates running for office to speak about the issues concerning sustainability in a substantive way. The forum will also allow you to hear from Rob Astorino and Noam Bramson about where they stand on the issues of sustainability that matter a lot to all of us. This event tonight is nonpartisan, and this event is meant to be educational. And we hope that it provides you the information that you need to make informed decisions when you go to the polls to vote on November 5th. So before I welcome our co-hosts from Pace Law School to say a few words, I'd like to acknowledge our partner organizations for making this event the success that I think it will be. Bedford 2020, Bronxville Green Committee, Citizens Campaign for the Environment, Federated Conservationists of Westchester County, Riverkeeper, Scenic Hudson, Teatown Lake Reservation, Tri-State Transportation Campaign, Westchester County Bar Association, Westchester Land Trust, and Yonkers Committee for Smart Development. The widespread participation of all these groups really points to how important sustainability is to all of us. Now I'd like to welcome Professor Lynn Harmon, Assistant Dean and Director of Environmental Law Programs, to say a few words.
Welcome everybody to Pace Law School on behalf of Dean Michelle Simon and President of Pace University Steve Friedman, both of whom had conflicts they could not move, so I get to welcome you tonight. I'm really proud to direct the finest environmental law program in the country, and you don't have to we have some of our students here tonight too. Yay, student. And just as Exhibit A, he's gonna kill me probably. Where is John Cahill? There you are. Okay, so I think almost everyone here must know John. Former Commissioner of DEC and Special Policy Advisor to the government, among many, many other honors. So this forum fits right in with our educational mission here, which is to apply critical thinking and creative power in considering solutions to major environmental major environmental problems facing Westchester County and the world as well. And we want to thank the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund and the partner organizations for making this possible, and also the candidates for coming here tonight and talking to us. And we look forward to a lively and enlightening evening. So enjoy.
Hi, I'm Marcia Bistron. I'm the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, and my role is to outline the rules of the game, explain the format. Tonight is a forum. It's not a debate. The candidates will appear sequentially. Each candidate will have approximately 30 minutes, and then there'll be another half hour in between the two candidates. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions. Those questions are going to be posed by a panel that I will introduce in a moment. But we want to hear from you too. When you came in, you were given an index card, which was your opportunity to pose a question yourself. If you filled that out, raise your hand and we'll have people pick them up, and we can pick them up over the course of the evening. If you fail to get that index card, raise your hand too and someone will provide it. Keep the hand up, keep the hand up. And with that, oh, and one thing, when you fill out those cards, we want to know who you are and what your question is. And there's someone down here who needs a card. I'll be the ones asking the candidates the questions based on the cards you submit to me. So they're not going to be questions directly from the floor from the audience. Also, in the spirit of hearing really what all the candidates have to say, I'd like to ask all of you to refrain from applause or reaction to answers. We only have a half hour for each candidate, and we really want them to be able to speak to you as much as they can. So with that, I'd like to introduce your panelists. Beginning at that end, we have Andy Bickings, who's the Director of Public Policy for Scenic Hudson. Over here, Adrian Esposito, Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Professor Carl Copeland, Copeland from Pace Law School, and certainly not least, although perhaps last alphabetically, Paul Gallet of Riverkeeper. We will be welcoming up Rob Astorino in the second half of the program, but to start off, I'd like to introduce our first candidate, Noam Bramson. So this is yours, and we're going to start off with questions. And our first question, what we're going to do is each of these panelists is going to have a chance to ask one question, and then a chance to ask another question, and then we're kicking it over to you. So our first panelist is Andy Bicking.
Thank you and welcome. My question is related to public access along our waterfronts for pedestrians and bicyclists. We know that this is a proven strategy to achieve public health and economic development goals. The question is, would you commit capital funds from the county to complete the Westchester County Riverwalk? And in addition, what can be done to incentivize municipalities to implement this vision of a connected walkway along the Hudson River?
Thanks very much for the question, Andy. And before I answer, can I thank the League of Conservation Voters for putting together this forum. I thank all of you for attending. I think it's vitally important that we have a conversation about the whole constellation of issues that come under the umbrella of sustainability, and to have this be actually the first of the forums that the county executive candidates are participating in, I think is really positive. So my short answer is yes. I think it's critically important that we maximize public access to the shoreline for all the reasons that you offered, Andy. And we know that much of the shoreline, whether it's the Hudson or Long Island Sound, was developed decades ago when our vision of what the waterfront can and should be was entirely different. We thought of it as an industrial access point, and land use patterns often fit those characteristics. But when you have a chance to create open space assets that can be enjoyed by an entire community, that can have a catalytic effect on economic development in the surrounding areas, when you have a chance to clean up brownfields and transform them into clean settings that actually promote public health, that's a remarkable opportunity for all of us. Now, I have some direct experience in this in New Rochelle, where we've been working to take a 10-acre brownfield that's been used for public works storage and a variety of abandoned concrete plants and automotive and industrial uses, and create there a vital mixed-use setting with continuous public access to Long Island Sound, a new 5-acre park, housing, shops, mixed-use development. It's exactly the kind of thing that creates a new public pathway to the water's edge, and at the same time revitalizes a regional economy. So the Riverwalk is obviously an exciting, dramatic planning initiative that, when completed, will really change the way Westchester orients towards the Hudson River. And I think that the county can most certainly use its capital resources and its planning resources both to directly stimulate the kinds of changes we'd like to accomplish and to create carrots that can encourage municipalities to be partners in accomplishing all those objectives.
Terrific. Now, this is a model, right? Stayed under the 2 minutes? Okay. Professor Copeland.
Yes, my question is going to go straight to the question of sustainability, since avoiding catastrophic climate change globally is going to require aggressive reductions in fossil fuel-powered energy use. New York State Executive 24, Order 24 set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in New York State by 80% below 1990 levels by the year 2050. And unfortunately, suburban areas like Westchester County tend to have the highest per capita greenhouse gas emissions because of development patterns that emphasize large single-family homes and require single-passenger automobiles for commuting, for shopping, for recreation. This raises the question of whether suburbia itself is sustainable. And my question for you, and from a planning perspective, 2050 is really not that far away. My question for you is, what is your plan to ensure that Westchester County can exist as a sustainable community in the year 2050 with an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, not just on the part of county functions, but on the part of county residents as well?
Okay, well, that is a critical question, and it's going to be hard to answer it in 2 minutes. But I will say that as someone who's running for county executive, I'm certainly not going to argue that suburbia is unsustainable. I think what we have to figure out is how to ensure that we can preserve and emphasize the quality of life that many people value in this region, and at the same time meet those sustainability goals. And it's not easy, but the good news is, if we do this properly, then the same actions which promote sustainability can actually enhance our quality of life rather than detract from it. And really the key question is one that was implied by the way you phrased the inquiry, and it is, how do we want to grow in Westchester? If you assume that a certain level of growth is almost inevitable, and New York City is projecting 1 million new people by 2030, do you encourage that growth along a transit-oriented model so that you can reduce reliance on the automobile, encourage the use of mass transit, at the same time make sure that downtown areas are walkable, accessible to pedestrians and cyclists, and through those mechanisms reduce the use of fossil fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Do you instead, which would be the wrong approach, gobble up open space and overburden our services and degrade our environment and clog our roads with traffic? So two very different kinds of futures, and one which would clearly emphasize environmental values. And I do believe that the county can play a critical role on multiple levels. A, we can be using our planning expertise to work with municipalities on comprehensive plans and model zoning codes and generic environmental impact statements that encourage the right form of growth patterns. B, we can be using our capital resources to not only replace depreciated assets, but make strategic investments that are consistent with all of these planning principles. And in every regard, we can be promulgating information that municipalities, businesses, and homeowners can use to reduce their own carbon footprint and reduce their own energy consumption.
Terrific. Adrian Esposito.
Thank you. Good evening. My question has to do with an emerging issue regarding public health and water quality, and that's the safe disposal of pharmaceutical drugs. You may know, or you should know, that trace amounts of pharmaceutical drugs are now turning up throughout waterways and estuaries throughout our nation. In fact, in 1999 and the year 2000, the USGS found trace amounts of pharmaceuticals in 80% of all surface waters that they tested, including anticonvulsants and steroids and antibiotics. My question to you is, what will you do as county executive to provide safe disposal options, not only for residents, but also for our large-scale health institutions, such as hospitals, hospices, and also long-term care facilities? Other counties have been taking on this particular dilemma, but not Westchester, not yet. How will you change that?
Well, thank you for the question. And
You're welcome.
I'm going to admit right up front that's a subject I'd like to study more, but I'm going to give you my initial response. So first of all, we all understand, or should understand, that the environmental impacts on public health are very significant. And there's all sorts of evidence that trace amounts of, whether it's pharmaceuticals or antibiotics that find their way into the food supply, or any number of other forms of contaminants that sometimes go without detection really do have an impact on our health. So the issue is a serious one. And I do believe that a regional government like the county can play a vital role in making sure that we dispose of materials like that in an appropriate fashion. Much better to accomplish that regionally than either to let the problem go neglected or to relegate it to dozens of municipalities that would be able to do it in a far less efficient and cost-effective fashion. So my approach generally for a challenge of that kind would be to have collaborative discussions with all of the relevant stakeholders, including the kinds of large institutions, medical institutions and others that you described, and work with the best experts in order to devise a system that is effective and is also done in a way that's cost-effective.
Thank you. Paul Gallet.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have a two-part question on a topic that will surprise no one to hear me ask about it. In just about a week, the first license at Indian Point Nuclear Power Station is scheduled to expire, and the plant is being given permission to continue to operate while its application for renewal is being considered, and the second license expires in 2015. Isn't it time to retire the plant, given its age, the amount of reports we see on security problems, the inherent unworkability of the evacuation planning? And also, isn't it time to move the spent fuel that is very tightly packed into relatively unprotected storage pools into so-called dry cask storage deemed safer by officials as lofty as the new Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz?
I had no idea that Riverkeeper had an interest in, in Indian Point.
Playing true to type here.
So the answer to your question, in my opinion, is yes. Let me elaborate. I'm of the opinion that a nuclear power plant should never have been located in such a densely populated region with escape routes that I think most people acknowledge would be inadequate in an emergency. And of course, concerns have only been intensified in the aftermath of 9/11 when we recognized the potential vulnerability of a nuclear power plant, including the fuel storage that you made reference to. So I do think we need to have a coherent strategy for transitioning away from reliance on Indian Point and making sure that we have substitute sources of power. I don't think that's something that can occur overnight. We need to make sure that we have access to hydropower. We should be pursuing a comprehensive strategy of conservation. And we should be looking at a process of distributing power generation. So we get away from this model of a centralized provider of energy that is distributing in multiple directions. We should have nodes of power generation, which would actually be more resilient in the face of storms and other things that have resulted in power outage. So this is something that requires county leadership. It requires state leadership through oversight of the utility companies. And it requires a collaborative relationship with the federal government as well. But I would be committed to accomplishing that because I think it's important for the safety of our region, and I think it's important in terms of achieving a clean energy future that will minimize risks and maximize positive environmental benefits. And what I detect, unfortunately, is a degree of drift right now, in that I don't think there is any coherent strategy for relieving us of dependence on Indian Point. And it does require focused leadership. And all of these challenges, of course, are interrelated. It does require focused leadership in order to move the ball forward. I'm a little scared of that buzzer, so I try to wrap it quick.
Okay, round two. Andy?
Thank you, Marcia. The question relates to climate change. Westchester County is blessed with many waterways, which are unfortunately due to flooding due to the increased severity of storms and sea level rise, both along the Hudson River and Long Island Sound. The question is, what can the county do to adapt to these rising waters, minimize damage to property, and ensure the protection of our natural resources?
That is one of many impacts associated with climate change that we have to wrestle with more seriously than we have. So I think there's several things that can be done with respect to waterways in particular. We know that because of silt deposition over many years, there are many waterways that have lost their natural carrying capacity. and through improved channelization or removal of silt, their natural carrying capacity can be improved, which would make them healthier waterways and which would also have the effect of mitigating flood impacts. In many cases, we have lakes that are linked to these stream beds, and through mechanisms that allow us to reduce lake levels in advance of storms, we can improve their retention capacity, which helps deal with flooding downstream. More broadly, we know that real flood mitigation depends on a combination of gray infrastructure and green infrastructure. Traditional stormwater solutions that in many cases are necessary, and I have to say that although the county made a commitment to stormwater mitigation in the aftermath of the 2007 flooding, the promise has not yet been realized, but also green infrastructure, bioswales, rain gardens, other mechanisms which prevent floodwaters from ever making their way to stormwater lines and prevent them from making their way to the streams and rivers that might otherwise flow over their banks. So this requires us to really rethink our built environment, how we construct roads, how we create incentives for homeowners to use permeable pavers or not use permeable pavers. So it's a multi-level challenge that requires direct government action, requires priorities in terms of funding, and requires setting an example and maximizing the flow of information to partners in the private sector, whether homeowners or businesses, who can exemplify these virtues.
Carl.
Okay, thank you. Another question on climate change and sustainability, but this directly related to transportation, because obviously any hope of achieving a sustainable rate of carbon emissions is going to depend on getting people out of single-passenger cars. And Westchester County is very lucky to be very well served by 3 Metro-North rail lines, but those lines are all designed to take people from the suburbs to the city center, and there's no really good, attractive option for cross-county or travel from suburb to suburb, which is what a large portion of the workplace commute now consists of. The Tappan Zee Bridge replacement project is going forward, but there's no actual plan to make actual improvements to mass transit in that corridor as part of the Tappan Zee Bridge project. There's a task force, mass transit task force, in conjunction with the Tappan Zee Bridge project. They seem to be drifting towards, we'll get improved bus service. Bus service, in turn, has generally proven not sufficient incentive to get people out of their cars. Unlocking that I-287 corridor is obviously going to be key to addressing, the long-term transit needs of the whole region. Do you have a plan on how to crack that nut to open up the I-287 corridor?
Yeah, and I think this is such an exciting opportunity. I mean, when the Tappan Zee Bridge is eventually equipped with bus rapid transit, which we hope and expect will occur, even though it won't be on day one. The idea is not just to get people quickly from the west bank of the Hudson to the east bank of the Hudson, or vice versa. It has to be integrated into a larger system that serves the region, and it begins with the 287 corridor. So figuring out what are the nodes of mixed-use activity that we want to develop, how are they going to be served by bus rapid transit, what kind of infrastructure is necessary in order to support those nodes, how will that infrastructure be financed? Those are critical questions, and we've got to be answering them now. Because if we don't, we're either going to miss this opportunity entirely, or we're going to answer those questions in the wrong way. And because of the nature in which responsibilities are divided in this region, we know it's going to involve conversation between the county and the municipalities that have ultimate land use authority. And so that's something that I am deeply committed to. And it doesn't have to stop at the 287 corridor. It can be integrated into the Central Avenue corridor, which serves a significant portion of western Westchester County. And by the way, the county had a great BRT plan for the Central Avenue corridor that has been left on the shelf for the last few years, which is terribly unfortunate. It can be integrated into the I-95 corridor. It can be integrated into the southern tier with the Cross County Parkway, something that, as the mayor of New Rochelle, I've had many discussions with counterparts in Mount Vernon and Yonkers. So we begin to think about how the transportation fabric of the county could really be positioned for success over the course of the next century. There's some great people involved in the Mass Transit Task Force, including some people who are here right now, but it seems to be that despite their efforts, our county is not doing enough to really grasp this opportunity with both hands. I mean, Rockland, frankly, is well ahead of us. in terms of figuring out exactly how a BRT system would be structured. And my competitive juices get flowing when I hear that, because I want Westchester to be really setting the stage and setting the model.
Terrific. Before we go to Adrian, this is your last call here. You have a question?
It's last call.
Put it on a card and somebody will pick it up. Adrian?
Speaking of wanting Westchester to set the stage, I have a softball that you could hit out of the park. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to talk about the ubiquitous plastic bag. There you go. It's an easy one for you. Let's hope this is a good answer. As you may know, the EPA estimates that the average American uses between 300 and 700 plastic bags each and every year. As we all know, they end up everywhere. In our parks, not so much in our landfills, but along streets, in beaches, along scenic areas, parks, and obviously actually killing 260 species of marine life as well. So many villages and also one city right here in the county of Westchester have moved to ban plastic and disposable bags so that people can change their behavior and use the reusable bags, including the city of Rye, the village of Mamaroneck, and also the village of Larchmont. What will you do as county executive to rid us of the plastic bag plague and change people's behavior to use reusable bags, which is easy and cheap to do?
Boy, actually, was that applause or snaps? I wasn't quite sure what that was.
Thank you.
You can withdraw your card and submit a new one now, right? So, I would be strongly inclined to support a plastic bag ban for the region on a personal basis. I support it. My only hesitation in committing to it firmly is I'd want to have discussions with municipal officials and others in order to ensure that there's a requisite level of support. But from everything that I've seen when bans have been instituted elsewhere, the fears that they might prove to be difficult for small businesses, that they might prove difficult for consumers, simply haven't been realized. The transition has been a relatively simple one. And when you think that so many of the environmental challenges we face really are complicated, potentially costly, require many, many years of persistence and patience in order to solve, here is something by contrast that's relatively simple to do and which would pay immediate dividends, and which also, in addition to the direct benefits, has a public education function. Simply getting us into the habit of reusing materials instead of disposing of them, I think helps remind each of us of our individual responsibility to help promote sound environmental practices. So I hope it's something that I'll have an opportunity to pursue.
Paul.
Before I get to my second question, I have some good news for you. You said in answer to the first question, you sense that there's drift, that there's no plan for the closure of Indian Point. Well, the good news is that in 2012, Governor Cuomo directed the Public Service Commission to require such a plan of Con Ed. That plan was actually completed. That plan found that we have a surplus, and it found that we have more than enough power projects on the front burner to maintain that surplus. So you can be a little less worried about drift and a little bit more confident about our ability to close Indian Point.
Now it's about implementation.
Absolutely. So on to water quality. We have sewer infrastructure in this county and this state that has been woefully underinvested in, and this is, I know, a topic that you know very greatly about, and the audience may or may not know that the EPA estimates between 1.8 and 3.5 million Americans become ill annually from contact with recreational waters contaminated by sewage. So were the recent improvements in the New Rochelle wastewater treatment plant a good thing because they improved water quality in Long Island Sound, or a bad thing because they led to increases in county sewer taxes paid by city residents?
I'm very glad you asked the question. I'm glad you asked it in just the way you did. And I encourage you to pose that question in the next segment for reasons I will offer in a moment.
Everybody gets the same question.
Oh, well, very good. I think it was a necessary thing, no question about it. And look, we should understand why water quality is critical. I mean, there's a direct benefit for those of us who care about the environment, but there are also many practical reasons why we should care about it. Our entire economy in Westchester County is intimately linked to Long Island Sound and the Hudson River. And you can imagine that if the degradation of these waterways, hypoxia, other challenges, were to continue unabated, that the economic value to the region of these assets would also diminish. So from both an environmental perspective and a public health perspective and an economic perspective, we have to move forward. And with respect to the New Rochelle sewage treatment plant, frankly, we were under order to get it done. So whether we liked it or not, it's something that had to proceed. Now, the reason this is an interesting issue is I was accused by the other fellow in the race of raising the New Rochelle sewer tax, a claim that was found to be unfair by the Nonpartisan Fair Campaign Practices Committee because New Rochelle does not have any control over the sewer tax. And the defense from the other side was, well, you supported the sewer upgrade, so you're responsible for the tax, which would seem to imply that they did not support the sewer upgrade. So then Governor Pataki came to town and praised my opponent for his support of the New Rochelle sewer upgrade. So I'm not sure whether he was against it before he was for it or for it before he was against it, and I'm not sure where he is right now, but I'm looking forward to learning in the next segment. So we'll see.
Okay, on to questions from the audience. First question. This is back to the real world. How can the county take a leadership role in advancing countywide sustainability policies, given its limited role with regard to home rule?
That's a fair.
What can you really do?
Fair and important question. So first of all, let's remember what the county has already done. You know, the county produced a tremendously effective and comprehensive climate action plan, which is accomplished by some of the people in this room. A great set of tools, great set of information that could be used by municipalities, could be used by county residents. And that has simply gathered dust on a shelf in the years since. So in my opinion, it's time to take that off the shelf, update it, and make sure it's as accessible as possible to everyone in Westchester. The county did great work in the form of Westchester 2025, which was an effort to really model potential growth patterns and provide a tool that individual municipalities could employ as they think about what they want to look like in the years ahead. And the companion to that was some terrific software, which actually lets you model in 3D what full build-out of a particular zoning configuration might look like. There is literally no one in the planning department right now who knows how to operate the software, which I think illustrates the degree to which the county's planning capacity has been degraded in recent years, and that's a terrible shame. And the county has a significant infrastructure and capital budget, which can be employed in order to maximize environmental goals and to buttress the right form of economic development that's consistent with all the planning principles that we've been talking about over the entire course of this session. So I'm a big believer in home rule, and I don't think the county should be imposing solutions on any community. But the county can make it easier for communities to make healthy and appropriate and intelligent decisions for themselves through the provision of information, expertise, and resources that are consistent with regional goals. That has been our experience in years past, and that certainly can be our experience and should be our experience going forward.
Next question, and I'm using this question because it's someone who actually put their name on the question, so next time around. This is from Carolyn Cunningham, Federated Conservationists of Westchester. County parks. Would you unfund our parks if funds are short, or would you find other areas to cut back? Where do parks come in your priorities?
Oh, Carolyn. Well, that in one sense is a softball question. So let me say, I love parks. I'm a big supporter of parks. I take my 9- and 7-year-old to parks. I spent half of my happy childhood wandering around the Nature Study Woods, which is a county park in New Rochelle. I lived about 2 blocks from it, and I felt like I knew it like the back of my hand, and still do. So, I mean, we all understand the value of parks, and we're so blessed in Westchester to have parks with all sorts of different characteristics, from active recreation to passive, woodlands, waterfront, and no one doubts that those assets contribute so much to everything that makes Westchester special. So they would rank very high in my priority list. And my honesty compels me to say, though, that it's always this or that. And so I would never make a blanket commitment to anything without knowing what the trade-offs involved might be. But I would be reluctant to cut parks because I think reductions of that kind tend to be penny wise and pound foolish. Because if you cut back on maintenance, if you cut back on making sure that parks are fully used, in the end you probably degrade property values in the surrounding area, you increase your maintenance costs down the road, and you give people less value in exchange for their tax dollars. And I think there are other ways that we can economize, which may be outside the scope of this discussion, but for example, sharing services more fully among different municipalities and school districts strikes me as an intelligent way to economize rather than pulling back on the assets that people most enjoy and feel give them the most direct return on the money that they send to the government.
Looks like I have only one more question from the audience I can ask to keep the time frame equal for all. So you've got one more question from the audience and then a 2-minute closer. Do you support the passage of a county-wide complete streets policy for Westchester County modeled after the New York State legislation?
Yes, and in fact, we have adopted a complete street ordinance in New Rochelle. Now, that does not mandate complete streets in every instance. It does require an analysis, costs and benefits, and creates a mechanism by which we seriously consider whether we can have not only street features that would make our roads more pedestrian-friendly and more cyclist-friendly, but also some of the sort of green infrastructure features that I mentioned earlier that can help with water filtration and help with flood mitigation. So I think it's essential. Look, our built environment, we've got to understand, really defines the way we live and defines our relationship with the environment around us. And historically, not because of a lack of concern, but because of a lack of knowledge, we've done a lot of things wrong that have the result of forcing us into certain habits of living that don't necessarily serve our own interests. And the idea of having complete streets is, it comes from experience, knowing that there are different models that work better, that enhance public health, that give us more choices, and that ultimately are better for our natural resources. So why on earth would we not want to proceed down that track in Westchester County? And why on earth would we not want to encourage that similar model among all the different entities within the county that have an opportunity to work on public infrastructure?
Terrific. Now, if you would, a 2-minute finale.
Terrific. Well, thank you again for the great questions and for your presence. It's really been a pleasure, and the half hour kind of flew by, I have to say. And I guess I'll close by just saying this. There are a whole set of issues that flow from the nexus of economic and environmental policy. And we've touched on an awful lot of them today. And what I want you to know about me, and I hope it came through in the conversation now, is that these issues are not simply things that I support and not simply things that I regard as priorities. They've really been at the heart of my public service as a mayor in New Rochelle, at the heart of what I've tried to do with respect to well-planned economic growth, at the heart of what I've tried to do when New Rochelle created its first ever sustainability plan. That's something I was intimately involved in. And now we're implementing that to save energy and have intelligent land use policies and conserve our natural resources and improve public participation and improve transportation and mobility options. So I really believe in these issues. I believe in them deeply because I know they're going to have a huge impact on our lives in the years ahead, either negatively if we get it wrong or positively if we get it right. And I want my kids, I want everyone's kids, to have a chance to grow up in a community that's healthy and vibrant and seizing positive economic opportunities for the future and making sure that we have a healthy experience that really enables us to make the most of our lives. That's what this is about, and that's what I hope to accomplish if I'm county executive.
Thank you very much.
I'll send you that sweater.
Okay, go nowhere because we're segueing right into our second act here. We have County Executive Rob Astorino is here, I am told. I'm getting hand signals. I'm not quite sure what they mean. He's drinking a glass of water. It's like charades.
Yeah, no, this is a glass of water. That's...
But I'm going to ask, we're still going to offer opportunities for new questions. Doesn't have to be the same. Okay? Terrific. Welcome. And here we go, right into the fire. Our first question is from Andy Bickings.
Thank you and welcome. County Executive, our question relates to public access to waterfronts. As you know, this is a proven strategy for when we bring pedestrians and bicyclists to our waterfronts for both public health and economic development goals. The question is, would you commit capital funds to complete the Westchester County Riverwalk, and what can be done to incentivize municipalities to implement the vision of a connected walkway along the Hudson River?
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for coming tonight, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we have done in our 4 years, and the Riverwalk is something that's been very special and very important to us. It is something that my predecessor, County Executive Spano, started, and I'm proud that the policies that he did that made sense, we're continuing. And this is one that certainly made sense. Riverwalk is something that we have invested in. We've invested $8 million into the city of Yonkers for the Riverwalk project over there. We're also looking right now at a parcel in Ossining at the Mariondale property to do something at that location. And we're also looking at Riverwalk in Yonkers near the water treatment plant with Paul Elston from the Bronx Greenway. And that's something that would be very, very good because then we connect the Bronx and Westchester. So we have made a real commitment to the Riverwalk, and we'll continue to do that.
Terrific. Carl Copeland?
Well, on behalf of Pace Law School, as a professor here, let me welcome you to Pace Law School. My question is going to go straight to sustainability in Westchester County. Avoiding catastrophic climate change is going to require aggressive reductions in fossil fuel-powered energy use. As you may know, New York State Executive Order 24 set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions statewide by 80% by 2050. Suburban areas like Westchester County tend to have higher per capita greenhouse gas emissions because of development patterns that emphasize large single-family homes and tend to require single-passenger cars to get to work, to get to shopping, to get to recreation. From a planning perspective, 2050 isn't that far away. So my question really is Westchester County suburbia sustainable, and what plan would you have to ensure that the county can meet that 80% reduction, not just on behalf of the county functions, but on behalf of residents, so it is sustainable in the long run?
Well, I think an important project that we have continued and funded, and that was one of the first things I had to decide when we got into office. The prior administration had begun through our planning department what's called Westchester 2025, so we're even closer than 2050. But this is a real comprehensive planning tool that's used by our county with the municipalities so everyone can understand better planning on a regional basis. And we did fund it, and it is on the web with an introduction to me because it's an important project. And it's something that looks at transit-oriented development and areas where everyone can work together in a community. The biggest thing I think which is really important is the mass transit for our region. You talk about getting cars off the roads. Mass transit is something that I feel very strongly about, and it's something that in many ways I put my political head on the line for with the new Tappan Zee Bridge. The governor and I, it was pretty public, squabbled over this because, you know what, he, in the plans for the bridge, decided that mass transit was not acceptable at this point. I fought and withheld my vote publicly in order for him to get the funding necessary for the new Tappan Zee Bridge and $2 billion on the line. I said I'm withholding my vote, and he needed my vote to be unanimous, unless there is a mass transit component on the Tappan Zee Bridge from day one. And because of that, we worked together, and I'm proud that the governor and I worked through this, and the governor made a real commitment to it. And so from day one, there will be at least a component of bus rapid transit. The task now, and I'm on this task force, and we have to wrap it up by the end of this year, is to look at short, medium, and long-range plans for the metropolitan area, but specifically the Tappan Zee Bridge corridor, Rockland and Westchester, and the 287 corridor especially. So that's something that I think will have a profound effect, not just today, but for generations to come.
Thank you. I don't think we alerted you to the bell, so I just wanted to tell you,
It's better
you
than
have a 2-minute limit. He'll
better than
flag
electrocution,
anyway.
that's okay.
Adrian Esposito.
Hi, County Executive.
Hi.
As the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment, we've been working throughout the state of New York and Connecticut to provide more safe disposal options for unwanted pharmaceutical drugs, not only for residents, but also for large-scale health institutions, hospitals, long-term care facilities, hospices. And in fact, you might know, the USGS has found in 1999 and the year 2000, 80% of all surface waters tested throughout our nation have trace amounts of pharmaceutical drugs in them. Antibiotics, anticonvulsants, steroids, and more. My question is that there are other counties throughout New York that have looked to tackle this problem, but not yet Westchester. So what will you do to establish safe disposal programs, not only for the residential unused and unwanted prescription drugs, but also for those large-scale institutions, which we discussed?
Well, I have to disagree with you respectfully on this, because we have two big programs that are in use for ridding the pharmacological and drugs from the waste stream, and it's done two ways. First, we created the Household Material Recovery Facility, which I'm very, very proud of, and this is at the Grasslands Reservation, where in the past you had twice a year where you could bring all your household toxic materials, your chemicals, your e-waste, and your unused or expired drugs. That now we built, it opened up a year ago, and everyone is from all around the county are bringing all their e-waste and their medications where they're properly disposed of. We're also with a drug back program with 20 police departments that is spearheaded by the county police. So we're working with 20 local police departments, as well as beginning the process to work with, as you were saying, some of the big hospitals to properly dispose of these medications so they're not in the waste stream.
Thank you. Paul Gallet from Riverkeeper.
County
Hello, Paul.
Executive, good to see you.
Good to see you.
2 nights in a row.
That's right.
I have a two-part question. It will come as no surprise to you. Indian Point's first license expires this weekend. Yeah. Its second license expires in 2015.
Riverkeeper is now in favor of that?
Oh.
Staying open? I thought that was going to be the surprise.
That would be much too easy in a question for you. Isn't it time for the plant to close when its licenses expire, considering that there are new federal studies suggesting that the evacuation plan is insufficient, suggesting that security considerations are insufficient, and a state-approved plan for the replacement power for Indian Point as required by the Public Service Commission and submitted by Con Edison? Second half of the question, shouldn't we also be moving the spent fuel from their storage pools, which are much more tightly packed than ever intended, into so-called dry cask storage, as advocated by officials as high up the chain as U.S. Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz?
I do believe that Indian Point should remain open. I very strongly feel that nuclear energy, as the President does and the Energy Secretary does, that nuclear should be part of our component with regard to our fuel choices and energy solutions in this country. And so I have advocated that Indian Point, the thing that I'm concerned about and that I do have to directly be involved in are the plans for any evacuation. if it's necessary one day for a very small or large-scale evacuation. And we drill twice a year, rated by the federal government and the state government. I have to rely on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the government agency that is in charge of nuclear facilities. They have said that Indian Point, out of the 104 reactors total, I guess, with some closing down, is the safest. It's the green rating. And so I believe Indian Point should remain open. It should be relicensed. It should be part of our mix. It's 25% of our energy for this region. So going forward, there is no reason that, just like in Europe, they rely on nuclear energy in very environmentally friendly countries, we should be able to do that here too. But we do need to make sure that it is safe all the time, absolutely. That aging equipment needs to be replaced. But I'm concerned, as county executive, my role is not to license or not license. That's the federal government's role, and only the federal government's role. I am concerned and have to be concerned with the safety outside the facility and working with local jurisdictions if, hopefully never, but if there will ever be some sort of incident there, the evacuation could work. That's what we have to be worried about. But I am in favor of Indian Point staying open.
How about the spent fuel question? Move to dry cask storage.
You know what? That's something I have an open mind on. I mean, I want to make sure that if the NRC recommends that, and that is part of the protocols, and that would keep it safe, the rods, then that's something that we should look at. But I am more concerned about making sure Indian Point remains open for this region, but is operated safely, and making sure that we can plan for anything that might happen.
Thank you. Okay, round two with the same crew. Andy Bicking.
Question relates to climate change. As you know, Westchester County is blessed with many waterways which are in...
No, it's okay, good.
They're going to
This
dance
is
a
clean
little.
water, right?
Great. Speaking of water.
Just a little pharmaceuticals.
Our waterways are unfortunately prone to flooding due to the increased severity of storms and sea level rise along both the Hudson River and the Long Island Sound. The question is, what can the county do to adapt to these rising waters, minimize damages to property, and ensure the protection of natural resources that are in harm's way for the future?
Well, and I don't tell you what we can do, but I'll tell you what we are doing. And right after Hurricane Sandy, and you know, in the last 4 years as I've been county executive, we've had to deal with storms none of us imagined. We've had freak snowstorms in October, which paralyzed the county. We had 2 hurricanes, which did a lot of damage. But following Sandy, one thing that I authorized was a $900,000 let's get that right. $900,000 study on vulnerability of our wastewater treatment plants, and to make sure that our pump stations as well are protected. So we're in the process right now of having engineers look at all of this to see where we're vulnerable and what changes we would need to make to safeguard these when the next storm comes. Because what we don't want is the overflow. We want to make sure that it's retained. We want to make sure they don't fail. And we've seen that and how it can happen in various locations, so we want to learn from the past so we don't repeat it. And this study, which is almost $1 million, has begun.
Carl Copeland.
Okay, it's going to sound like you already had this question given your answer to my first one, but I swear that nobody had the questions ahead of time. So, as you can guess, it has to do with public transportation because, as you sense, any hope of achieving a sustainable rate of carbon emissions is going to require excellent public transportation to get people out of single-passenger cars. Westchester County is really lucky to be well served by Metro North in a north-south direction in the commute from the suburb to the city center, but the cross-county commute and the inter-suburb commute is not nearly as good. As you spoke about, the Tappan Zee Bridge is going forward, the Tappan Zee Bridge replacement, and while we have the task force, there's no definite plan, right? The bridge project is going forward without an actual plan to unlock that I-287 corridor for attractive public transportation that will get people out of their cars and onto public transportation. I know the most recent reports from the task force is they're leaning in the direction of bus transit of some sort. Bus transit has not always been successful in getting people out of their cars. What's your plan to open that I-287 corridor and make it a reality and not just a task force plan that never gets put into place?
Well, you hit it, and that was in our negotiations with the governor, is I didn't want the mass transit component of the Tappan Zee Bridge to be an afterthought and to go on the shelf, because the George Washington Bridge 85 years ago, the second level, the lower level, was supposed to be for mass transit. That never happened. So we wanted to make sure that didn't happen for the Tappan Zee Bridge, and from day one there would be a true commitment. So that's why I requested as part of the deal that we would have a mass transit task force with a 1-year ending. So we have been working, and I've been going to all these meetings, we've been working very diligently to come up with, again, short, medium, and long-term solutions. The short-term solution is a dedicated lane on the bridge between both sides to make sure people get across. But what happens when they get over the bridge? Because you don't want to get in a bus, fly across the bridge, and then be stuck in traffic. What we're looking, and the challenge right now is, again, not only the 287 corridor, but also if we're going to have an effective bus rapid transit system or something like that, you have to get people not only from Rockland, and I'm just talking on this side, on the other side they're working on their own problems, but to get them over from Rockland into White Plains. Now there's a couple options. Tarrytown, where they could be dropped off and take the Hudson line, or, and what I'm advocating, is getting them across either 287 or, in a bus rapid transit form, a hybrid of 287 and 119. Now you can do that with light synchronization. You can do that in many different ways. But we want to get them into and through Tarrytown and Elmsford, where the economy can grow, into these office parks, and of course into White Plains, where we have a natural transit hub and transit center where they can get there and then either take Metro North on the Harlem line into Manhattan, or have a system of shuttles to get them to the office parks, but give them options so they don't have to take their own car. They could actually take a bus, and that would make sense to get them there.
Thank you. Adrian?
The next one is kind of a softball, I think. There you go. You ready? But I do have to respectfully disagree with you on your last answer. I would have to say there really has not been progress made on large-scale institutions safely disposing of pharmaceuticals at all. But the softball is about the ubiquitous plastic bag.
The bags, okay.
Yes, okay. As you may know, the EPA says that there's between 300 and 700 plastic bags used each year by each individual. They end up all over, in our parks, on our beaches, in our waterways, killing marine life, clogging storm drains, causing local flooding, etc., etc. Municipalities throughout the nation, whether it's the city of San Francisco or right here in Westchester, for instance, the city of Rye, village of Mamaroneck, and village of Larchmont have all banned them. What will you do as county executive to help rid us of the plastic bag burden and to have people change their behavior to use the reusable bags, which is cheap, easy, and effective?
I think two things. First of all, I'm not sure on a countywide basis we could have a countywide local law that would ban it. I'm not sure we can do that. But I do support, if the local communities want to have that ban, as 3 have already done, that's wonderful. And if they're seeing good results, that's great. I think education is the key to this. Just like recycling, a generation or more than a generation ago, where we have a public awareness campaign, I think that's very important, a whole aspect. And you're seeing it with, and I go to a lot of schools for Earth Day celebrations and discussions, and this is now settling into the minds of my kids' generations, just as it was beginning with me, where we're seeing a whole change in how we live, and I think this is one of them. So right now, I know when I go shopping at ShopRite or the A&P in my town, they have a recyclable for the bags, and some of them are now charging a nickel for a bag if you want a plastic bag. So there's different ways, just like with recycling and returning bottles and cans. Through that process, I think we can have a good education campaign as well. And that can be done countywide. There's no question about that.
Thank you. Paul?
I did this with Noam too, so don't feel singled out.
Okay.
In regard to Indian Point, you said a moment ago that the NRC has considered it to be the safest of the nation's 104 reactors. Actually, you need to understand that in 2010, the NRC rated it as the most at-risk plant for meltdown in case of an earthquake in the United States, including the California plants. That having been said,
On to your next question.
On to the next question. Westchester's wastewater infrastructure, like that of the entire state of New York, is in a state of disrepair because of deferred maintenance and capital expenditure, which, according to New York State DEC, would require an investment of $36 billion over the next 20 years to completely eliminate. And of course, the EPA also estimates that between 1.8 and 3.5 million Americans become ill annually from contact with recreational waters contaminated by sewage. And at the same time, we have a property tax cap in this state, and we have high taxes. So with that all having been said, were the recent improvements in the New Rochelle wastewater treatment plant a good thing because they improve water quality in Long Island Sound, where many people recreate, or a bad thing because it led to increases in county sewer taxes paid for by city residents?
Both. First of all, this is a consent decree that was entered into with the county and the state in 2009. It is a $200 million project all in. It's a lot of money. And so the people of that district are going to bear the costs of this. And I think, Paul, you said it right. We've got to find a healthy balance between what people can afford and our needs. And I would say, and I say this all the time, that infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our sewage treatment plants, this is the essence of what we should be doing, by the way. This is exactly what government should be doing. There's a lot of things that we should not be involved in. And because we're wasting money, and my feeling is we're wasting money on a lot of other things that government shouldn't be doing, it's not going to where it should. But we're spending a lot of money on that. It's necessary. It's a consent decree. We're doing it. But one thing that we did do when we came in is we did question the prices on this. We renegotiated with the Savin engineers who actually had the contract before we got in there, and we shaved several $1 million off the project. And that's what we're doing everywhere. That money that was saved can go somewhere else because we're looking at all of our infrastructure. We're looking at our sewage pump stations, our water pump stations, our lines, all of these things because they're aging. There's no question. They're years of neglect. It only gets worse. Now, by the way, is the best time to borrow because interest rates are lower. They're going up. But now is where we have $200 million in our capital projects for all of these kind of issues. We've put $50 million into our parks and some of the infrastructure there. So these are things that we're doing. And in fact, if you could put a good word in with the Board of Legislators, we have a lot of projects that have been there for over a year, 2 years, that need to get back out so we can do this work and also put people back to work, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to our audience phase. And I think what I'm going to do, because the questions you've been asked are exactly the questions the other candidate was asked, I think I'll stick with the same audience questions as well. I get some nods, right? Okay, good. I like approval. The first is, how can the county take a leadership role in advancing countywide sustainability policies given its limited role with regard to home rule?
Well, that's a toughie because, yes, home rule is very important. It's guaranteed by the New York State Constitution.
That?
I'm clearly fighting the federal government in HUD on home rule, and so it's an important one. But that's a balance where we can lead the way, and we have, I think, in many ways. If you look at the Westchester Green Business Challenge, for one example, we have now 250 businesses that are actively participating in sustainability and green initiatives for their own companies and getting their employees actively involved in something like this. And I've been now fortunate to go to 3 award ceremonies each year for this. And it's wonderful to see the Dannons of the world, Pernod Ricard of the world, really big and good corporate neighbors being involved in something like this. And this is something that the county began. This is on more of a big initiative for sustainability. And I think we're leading the way. We're also leading the way with our education initiatives, K through 12, and our higher education in our schools here, including PACE. So this is something that I'm proud of, and I think we can lead the way on something like that.
Thank you. Next question, and I said this was the one person who put her name on it, so I'm going to say it again. Carolyn Cunningham, Federated Conservationists of Westchester. Would you unfund our parks if funds are short, or would you find other areas to cut back? Where do parks come in your priorities?
Parks are very important. I love golf, and we've put some good money into our golf courses. But more than that, as I just mentioned, we have put $50 million in the last 2 years into our parks for capital improvements. This is our North and South County Trailway. I'm going to be, hopefully, in a long line of my predecessors, starting with DeBello and through O'Rourke and through Mr. Spano, the county executive that will finalize the North County, South County Trail. The missing link, which is in Elmsford, 9A and 119. We are now in the process, that's a $3 million project, to finally close that loop and to get that connected from the Bronx all the way to Putnam. We did one last project, was in Yonkers, and that was a multi-million-dollar project for the North and South County Trail. The Riverwalk, I forgot to mention before, as part of the Tappan Zee Bridge, we want to make sure that when they have a connection for pedestrians and bikes, that it connects with our Riverwalk. So you don't have two different projects, but it can all be connected. The problem that we've had with the budget has been personnel related. It's been issues like pensions and the pressures put on by that. So we've had, in some areas of the budget, a reduction in the personnel in different departments, but our commitment has never been stronger with regard to what we're actually putting money into. Playland is another perfect example. That's the jewel of our parks, so at least most people understand that. Playland is losing $3 to $5 million a year. That's not acceptable to me. Playland will be around forever because I want to make sure it's reinvented for the 21st century. So we're bringing private enterprise in here to make open space. We're going to have a green space, a green lawn to open up the views and access to the Long Island Sound, redoing the boardwalk, adding restaurants, adding outdoor fields. So I think this is a really good thing, along with a lot of the other things that we've done in our park system.
Thank you. Last question from the audience. Do you support the passage of a county-wide complete streets policy modeled after the New York State legislature?
I think as part of the Westchester 2025 in planning, it would be an opportunity for us as we go forward on some of these transit-oriented developments on the streets that we develop to make sure they're accessible for everybody. Our seniors, and we've been doing that with our Livable Communities initiative to make sure that bikes and pedestrians have equal access and opportunities, that the roads are not just for cars. And so, yes, I would.
Thank you. And now you have 2 minutes if you'd like to wrap.
Okay. First of all, thank you for hosting this forum. I
Thank
am
you.
very proud to seek the endorsement. Just so you know about me, I first got very active in the town of Mount Pleasant when I was a teenager. There was an issue with Pecanico Lake where there was a project to develop around Pecanico Lake, and that's really where my activism started. And we got very involved. The plan was killed, and Westchester County actually, as part of the agreement, took over Pecanico Lake, and that's how it started. And I was appointed to the Conservation Advisory Council when I was in my early 20s to Mount Pleasant. I was appointed to the Hudson River Valley Greenway Conservancy by Governor Pataki in 2006. I won the John D. Rockefeller Jr. Award last year for my progress and environmental issues. So I'm very, very proud of what we've done in Westchester. I'm proud of what I have supported throughout my life, and it is a very important part of who we are in this county. Open space initiatives that we have done. We spent a lot of money to acquire 59 acres of the Croft, which is part of the Teatown Reservation. That's phenomenal because that really protected the watershed area and connected the 2,000 acres into one. It also protected Vernay Lake. Our River Rescue, which is a volunteer effort to actually go in, and I did with my waders, to go in and clean out the Bronx River, which not only made the water flow better, but it also reduced flooding along the Bronx River Parkway. And that's an important aspect as we're attacking some of our flooding issues with $15 million reserved for this to go after our really hot spots, if you will, in this county. So I'm proud of what I've accomplished, not only in my 4 years as county executive. It's one thing to talk about a lot of this stuff, but we have done a lot of the stuff, measurable outcomes to what we have done. We've put our money where our mouth is. And my life in what I have done since I was little in Mount Pleasant, making that place a better place than it was. So I thank you for coming out tonight. I thank you for being on the panel and the League for working with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118,
Thank you. And thank you. That wraps for us. Stay in touch.
Good question.
God, I got to tell you.